All right. Happy Saturday morning.
Happy Saturday morning, lady.
I am very excited that you and I are talking. We haven't talked in this manner since Make It Make Sense. And we sunsetted Make It Make Sense in 2023. And I was doing a count, and I think we did over 200 episodes of Make It Make Sense, which is absolutely bonkers.
That was really cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think it was more fun when Quentin was doing it, because I didn't actually want to do it. It was a great idea and a great space for us to figure out how to reach people during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So, because as much as we had a presence online and social media, people weren't necessarily coming to Make It Work's Instagram to be wonder what they talking about. Any juicy gossip over there?
Listen, podcast was like just a term before the pandemic. I really did not know what it meant. And then the pandemic, I was like, does everybody know this new format of communication?
And now it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Sticky Note Conversations. I'm your host, Erika Washington. This week's episode is going to be one of my favorites. I have the opportunity and the joy of talking to a dear friend, Danielle Atkinson. She is a mother, a wife, and also the founding director of Mothering Justice and Mothering Justice Action Fund, which is two national organizations working to improve the lives of families by equipping the next generation of mothering activists. She is also a dear friend that really helped me get through the 2020 pandemic. Together with a few other dynamic women, we formed a bond and a text chain and some weekly Zoom calls that would help guide us through these uncharted territories. We didn't know what to expect with the pandemic, but that time helped ground us, and it gave us a chance to vent and laugh and cry and strategize around how we organize and lead through those trying times in the pandemic. And like I said, I'm not sure how I would have done it without that core group of really strong women. Danielle is also on the board of directors of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, Hope Starts Here, and the Ghana Lacrosse Association, and the board chair for 9 to 5. And in 2020, she was appointed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer to the Michigan Women's Commission. In 2022, Danielle was elected statewide to the Board of Governors of Wayne State University. I really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Danielle is amazing, so I think you will. And also to note, just as a disclaimer, I am and have been serving as the C3 board chair of Mothering Justice. So technically that makes me her boss, just a little bit. Anyway, y'all, thanks again for joining Sticky Note Conversations. So I thought we could talk about some of anything and everything. Yeah. But how I always like to start off is you introducing yourself, of how you describe and see yourself. This is not your bio per se. Mm-hmm. People have heard that, but who is Danielle Atkinson?
Ooh, who is? Listen, this is like a loaded question because it's been something I've been thinking about for a while, about how do I introduce myself outside of who I mean to other people, right? I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm an executive director, but I'm like, who is Danielle? And being a child of Jamaican immigrants, they're like, listen, all that find yourself stuff, you better find yourself in a classroom making good grades so that you can get a degree and then you can be somebody. So
you can take care of your mama.
Okay. So it's almost like an existential crisis. Who am I? But let me think. I'm somebody who likes adventure, but safe adventure. I am someone who is a caregiver. Like I enjoy caring for people. That is, something that is dear to me. I'm an athlete. I think I'm competitive physically, even when I can't physically compete. That's just something that motivates me. I'm a Christian. I'm a deeply spiritual person. And yeah, I'm someone who is coming into their own as someone who's like 40 now. I'm embracing what it means to be the elder in a room, but also the person who doesn't know as much and be okay with that. So I guess that's who I am. Danielle.
The thing of being the elder in the room. And I think I got you by a year. I'm 44.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at an event a couple years ago, and I'm talking to the young people that I didn't even think that they were that far apart in age from me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm telling some story about something, and this has having to do with movement work. And the way the young woman looked at me, and she's like, "Oh, you probably have so many stories to share about your experiences."
So many.
Ma'am. I'm like, well, how old do you think I am? I really felt like she thought she was sitting at the foot of my rocking chair.
I know, she's like the wisdom that will pour
right, exactly
from the mountain.
Let me sit still and listen. Please tell us about the civil rights movement.
I know.
I was very taken aback by that.
Yeah, but we do have wisdom, right? Like we do have, it's just life. But I do see people's eyes change when you say something that is profound to them, but common sense to you. And, if not when, are we going to step into that? So whenever the opportunity comes about, to have a conversation with somebody younger than me and they ask the question, I'm like, you know what? Sit down at the feet of my rocker. I'm about to tell you some stuff. But then having the confidence, right, to be in a conversation with someone older and be like, I don't know everything. So please share with me. It's interesting. It's humbling to make that transition constantly. But here we are. And
I'm embracing it. Like I have no desire to be in my 20s anymore. I think there is something very fabulous about the 40s, and I've heard the 50s are great too. So,
but tell my knees and back and hip that. Like, I'm trying.
There's extra stretching that needs to happen.
Well, I have to first be able to get into the stretching position. Okay, there's the waking up and the soreness.
But you're working out, and I appreciate having a workout partner when we are on the road together at the many conferences that we attend. And so having somebody else that will get up in the morning and go hit the gym before we are then smoozing and, as I say, working and twerking to find all of the funding that is necessary for us to continue our organization. So, you're taking it seriously.
Well, listen, you have to, right?
I watched Matlock. Wow, I'm on the treadmill.
Okay, friend.
That's my secret confession.
This only adds to the rocking chair wisdom.
The elder moment.
Yes.
It's nostalgia. Plus the episode,
like watching you watch this big-headed man in black and white in almost a zoot suit.
First of all, it's not in black and white, it's in color.
Okay.
Second of all, his seersucker suit that he wears in every episode is what it is. Like it's very problematic when you go back and rewatch some of the episodes because the Confederate flag is behind the judge in every episode.
Oh my God.
But it reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of my grandparents and laying on the floor with the floor model TV. And I would love me to watch some Matlock. It was the precursor before I started watching Law and Order. And all of the episodes are the exact amount of time that I need to spend on the treadmill, which is between 45 and 52 minutes. And so if I do that,
52, not 53, not 55.
52, maybe 52.3. But and everything is solved in that whole time. The problem is solved. The world, yeah, exactly. Everything is
wrap it up in a bow, please. Which that's what I love about 90s sitcoms. Everything that was a problem, the world was going to end at 10.14. By the time we get to the end of that show, you could sing a glory hallelujah.
And everyone's going to hug.
Everyone's going to hug. You're going to have that soft music that leads you out. I'm thinking about Family Matters. Saved by the Bell.
I didn't like Family Matters.
You didn't like Family Matters?
No, I thought Laura was a B.I.
Really?
Finish spelling that word. Yes, because I thought she was really rude to Urkel. He really liked her. And if she didn't like him, that's cool. But when he became Stefan, then she was like, oh, okay.
Because she liked him then.
Right, but it's the same person.
I feel like she was as
he just changed how he dressed. And so it was just, I don't know. The whole thing, like something about Family Matters just really irked me. It was not the show for me. Living Single, yes. I loved Living Single. But like Martin, I feel like unpopular. I did not like Martin. I don't like slapstick comedy. So the falling and the, over exaggerated.
Yes, I didn't like that. I don't like
all of that. It's just too much.
He was annoying to me.
He's still annoying to me, actually.
Yes.
And the fact that it was done in Detroit, was like the only cool point, I think, from that. But also, I have never seen anybody's apartment in Detroit actually look like that. So I don't know where he lived.
I know.
That was never actually explained.
I know. He's like,
and so you are a Michigander, not a Detroiter, but very close to being a Detroiter. You spend a lot of time in Detroit, and you organize women who are in Detroit and the surrounding areas. So you're basically a Detroiter.
Listen, no, first of all, those are your words, not mine. I'm not having anyone come for me because Detroiters do not play about their titles. And when I say Michigander, I feel like I need to say Michigander by choice. Because even though I've lived here longer than any other place in my life, people from here be like, but where were you born?
Where are you really from?
Something. Yeah, where are you really from? Which I'm fine with. I'm fine with explaining the whole, thing. But yeah, that claim is, they hold it tight and close to their chest. And so when I'm out in the world, not in this state, and people say, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, Michigan. They're like, oh, Detroit. I'm like, I look around. I'm like, listen, it is Metro Detroit. I do not live in Detroit proper. And if you say that in my name, I will deny this conversation because they will come for me. And I'm not ready.
But Mothering Justice is located in Detroit.
Yes, Mothering Justice is Detroit. Mothering Justice is formed out of the wisdom of the people of the city. The organization is we say that we have a participatory process. So all of our conversations, started in Detroit about what is the wisdom that mothers hold? What are the problems that you're facing? And what's the disconnect with what our government and elected officials and executives prioritize? So, yes.
So I always say, I didn't know this could be a job, being an executive director of a nonprofit organization that advocates alongside and with Black women for the betterment of Black women. And you are doing the exact same job. We have the exact same job. Did you know that it was a job to aspire to? And how did you decide to create Mothering Justice?
Yeah, I didn't know it was a job until I saw other people do the same thing for other people and ignore us. That's when I realized that it was possible. So, a little bit about where I came from and what led me to the moment where we started Mothering Justice, was, I went to school for political science and sociology, thought I would work on campaigns, politicized by initially my uncle and the politics that led to my family coming to America from Jamaica. So politics was always a part of our life. Then the Iraq War happened, when we were in college, and saw my campus torn apart because of it. And just really, that's when I knew that there was a narrative, right? There was a narrative and there was the truth. When we were talking about the Iraq War and Saddam Hussein and making the case, all the things that led up to the case for the second Iraq War that didn't make sense unless you were putting it in a political lens and for people's self-interest. I then said, okay, first of all, I don't know how much I love this idea of politics because it's not what I thought it was. And two, this might be what I have to do. This might be the job I have to do. And so came home, worked on a minimum wage campaign. I remember there was an ad. Our young people won't remember. There were papers and there were job ads. And you would look when you didn't have a job, you would look in this paper and then you would call a number. And the ad said, you want to save your community? You want to be a part of a difference? I was like, I do want to save my community. I do want to be a part of a difference. And it was for a canvas director for a minimum wage campaign. And I got the job and worked on a minimum wage campaign. It was a ballot initiative. And that's when I realized and fell in love with pure democracy and organizing. And I was like, oh, we can change stuff ourselves. We don't have to elect this questionable representative and just hope they get around to the issues that we care about. So
where was that at?
That was in Florida.
Okay.
That was in Florida. And that was during Kerry. So what is that, 2004? Mm-hmm. And we won the ballot initiative and lost the presidency, or at least Kerry lost the presidency. The Democrats lost the presidency. And so I was thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to work in politics, but I want to work in a way that has people at the center and having them understand small D democracy. And so my then boyfriend, now husband, lived in Michigan. I followed him up here because I was 27, and that's what you do when you don't know what you're doing with your life.
When you in love.
When you in love and you follow somebody all the way to the coldest place in the United States. And so
I don't think that's technically true, but it does feel like
it's technically true for my bones. Okay. I don't know about anything else, but my joints say it's true. Okay. And so we moved to Lansing, did some community organizing there, did some other things. And then my then boyfriend, now husband, wanted to move to Royal Oak, Michigan. And I was like, I don't know about Royal Oak, Michigan. I want to know what I want to do. And at the same time, a former colleague told me that there was this guy with a funny name who's running for president, and his wife wanted to do a women's for kind of campaign. And I said, oh, he sounds really interesting. Maybe let me think about it. That weekend, took a pregnancy test, girl. Found out I was pregnant. And the job was in Chicago. And I was like, you know what? This man is not going to make it past Super Tuesday. That's when this baby's due. I could still go to Chicago, I could go to Chicago, finish this campaign, and come back and have this baby. But then I was like, you know what? It's going to be really hard to be 9 months pregnant while wrapping up a campaign. Because again, in my head, this man was not going to make it past Super Tuesday. So I decided to stay. And he later became president. You might know him, Barack Obama.
Oh.
And I stayed and I applied for a job, and I hid my pregnancy in the interview process, because we all know that it's illegal to discriminate against somebody when they're pregnant, but
they do it anyway.
Exactly. Who wants to hire this 27-year-old who's about to have this life-changing thing happen? So I hid my pregnancy and I got the job, and I thought I was good until I looked at the price of childcare. Realized I didn't have any paid leave because it was a contractual position. And then I asked other organizers, I'm like, who is organizing moms around these issues? Because this is And somebody pointed me to an organization, and I was like, but they're all white. Everybody in the organization is white. And the issues seem very white in a frame that is not, it doesn't resonate with me. And that's when, I really came into sharp realization that the progressive politics that we were a part of didn't care about Black women, didn't care about Black mothers. And as much as they did care about us, they definitely didn't want our face on the issues. And I don't say that haphazardly in a, Kanye West way. I say that as somebody who has sat at tables where they're like, just don't have Black women talk about it. Can we look for a white woman who's married with maybe just 2 children to talk about this issue that disproportionately affects Black women? And I said, you know what? We're going to do something else, and we're going to do it differently, and it's going to feel good when we do it. And that was the birth of Mothering Justice.
Do you think, actually, I want to back up a little bit. You said that you didn't think politics wasn't what you thought it was. What did you think it was?
So, I thought, to me, politics was these great leaders, right? So my uncle, like I said, my uncle sponsored our family to be here. And this man was like a father to my mother, helped her through college. And we lived about 30 minutes from him where I grew up in Connecticut. And we would go to his house and, he'd always have the news on, and he'd always be talking about the difference between Republicans and Democrats and how, he wanted to support the country that supported him, and civil rights and women's rights, as much as an old Jamaican cares about that, but bless his heart. But yeah, it was always a conversation. We were always talking about Dukakis and Bush, and those were just, and so to me, it was a way of getting things, or where you stood on an issue or a value. That's what politics was to me, is being active, being aware, was signaling that you cared about how things were happening, and you were making it clear to people that you were on a side of the issues.
And do you think that that's an accurate description of how we see politics now?
Yeah, I think that's a surface level, right? I think that's surface level. In my family, I realized that, like, when my family on the group thread or in person are talking about politics, they're definitely talking about their values. And then they see the people who they elect and vote for as the people who embody their values. I think they stop there, right? That's it. I voted for them. I said what I said. And now whatever happens, happens. For me now, politics is about how much we're disrupting the status quo. Our country goes on not a trajectory. There is a normality to our politics and how we act. There are tweaks to the system. There are things that we do. But unless we are interjecting ourselves, politicians will politic. This is their game. This is their arena. And we have to insert ourselves in it in order for it to be reflective of what we need and for it to change.
And do you think that is just by voting, or do you think that there is something else that we should be doing right now?
Yeah, no, voting is the first and most minimalistic thing that we should do to be a participant in our democracy. When we think about the huge social programs in our country and the big changes in our country's history, none of that happened because we elected a certain person. It happened because a group of people organized around an injustice, right? Public schools were not always public schools until somebody said, this is a right that every child should have. We didn't have an 8-hour workday, which, we could talk about whether or not that's fair now. Before people who were exploited stood up and said, this is crazy that we have small children going into heavy machinery to fix it, and that people are working all day, and that people are dying in factory fires. That was the norm. And that would have continued unless a group of people said that's crazy. Police reform, civil rights, none of those things wouldn't have happened. Those were interjections because of radical people into a system of the status quo. So right now, when we talk about workers' rights or Black Lives Matter, they seem crazy now. But in 40 years, it'll just be, oh, there was an interjection of a bunch of radical people saying that the status quo wasn't fair, and then the status quo changed.
You mentioned your family and being immigrants into the United States. I'm wondering if there is any conversation about that radicalizing of being a Black person in the United States, especially being a new American, whatever that means and whatever that looks like, and whether or not you feel like, or they feel like, if y'all have had the conversation, that they are here to help disrupt as well, or just kind of just lay of the land, let me just get ourselves acclimated and become citizens, or is it more of like, we're here and I want to be here, but also things ain't actually the way they need to be?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same. First of all of us are in society. We all, I consider it, this is my poor analogy, it's a car wash. The world is a car wash. The country is a car wash. We go through it and we are inundated with things. And it doesn't matter what kind of car we are still going through the same car wash. So, right? So if you're Black, you're an immigrant, any of those, you are getting racism put on you. And that is something that you have to actively disrupt. So this car, let's say it's a Jamaican immigrant car, goes through the car wash and they've got racism on them. How they talk about racism has a lot to do with how you see yourself, how you see your internalized oppression, how you go about life to just survive. And so I can very much see when people talk about this country, no matter where they're coming from, I'm like, oh, I see how you are justifying so-and-so to, just make it through, or you've decided to, this is how you will participate in society because it's your survival mechanism. And so to relate that all to my family, I think they thought America was the dream. They did everything they could to get here. They worked really hard, and they said, if we work really hard, if we play by the rules, we'll be good. And I think to a large extent that was the case. And so when racism would pop its head up, they'd be like, well, we just have to put our head down and work a little harder. And everybody should do that. And then when it got too much, when things just did not make sense and there's no way you can justify it, then they're like, okay, racism really is a problem, And so I think that's how most people go through life, is thinking, the bootstraps mentality. Again, that's a layer that gets put on us in this country. And you're like, if I just work hard enough, if I just work 3 jobs, and then the cancer diagnosis comes, or you get laid off and it just doesn't really make sense because you just got an award 3 years ago for best attendance. These are things that happen in my family, that then it's like, okay, somebody needs to come and disrupt the narrative of hard work and bootstraps to interject the systemic problem of racism in this country. And then people are unburdened. And so I think that's where my family is, in different layers, in different times in history.
Mm-hmm. I just think about, the difference in what it's like as me being a Black American without concrete ties to anywhere else outside of the United States. And I haven't done one of those DNA tests, and I, have said that I might do it. And for a while I was kind of creeped out about it. And then I also thought if you give them, some top line information, they're going to say, yes, you're Black and you're from this place in Africa. And they're just going to make it up. And I'll be like, oh, right. Because how do I disprove it? No more than I can prove to the electric company how many kilowatts I am using. Even though I think them kilowatts be wrong.
I know. But, actually, my calculation says.
So I really want to know. And I find it, just one of those things that's interesting to me, that you can at least go back further. Right. Yeah. And so there's a different, I don't want to say a different set, just more identity that you can pull from. Do you feel like that makes you, do you feel American? Or do you feel Jamaican American? Or is there a difference?
Yeah. So there's the cliche of first generation people. It's like, it's a meme at this point. It's just comical. It's like, I'm not fully American. I'm not fully Jamaican. I think at some point we have to just own our own identity and belong to ourselves. Because, I don't know. Like I'm from here. My childhood looked very different. But when I walk down the street, ain't nobody being like, so tell me about that small, well-knit community of Jamaicans. But there are references I don't get. There are just things that are a little different. But I mean, we're all a little different. I am grateful to have Jamaican ancestry and to be tied to, some more really beautiful movements and cultures. But then there also is colonialism was there too. Slavery was there too. So, I got a few more steps back, closer to the continent, but there is a very hard reality of when Jamaica was colonized and what brought our people to the island was the same thing that brought our people to the United States. So when we talk about indigenous cultures and ways of being, all of those things were shunned in Jamaica as well. And how my child would say, how they celebrate God is a colonialized Christianity that was put upon all of us. And so, same story, different place, trying to find our way, the same as everybody, all of our displaced people.
So you bring up your children. And so you are a mother of 6 between 6 and 16. I know. I'm a good movement auntie. I know how old the babies are. Like when I met you, every time I saw you, you was pregnant. And I was like, oh, she takes this mothering justice so seriously. She wants to make sure she is the picture of mothering justice.
I'm gonna leave the movement plentiful.
Right. Okay? So what is that like at this point in this time to be raising these children who are in a lot of different stages? 16, that baby is, wanting to learn how to drive, maybe. I don't know, because most kids aren't really trying to drive. Exactly. So I don't know if yours is, because mine weren't ever really all that interested in driving. I've only got one that actually has a license, and all of my children are older than yours.
Yeah, we gave them too much freedom. Yeah, because that's the thing I think with this generation. I'm like, nobody wants to drive because they're like, I got all my stuff that I need right here. They're like, I can do it all from my room. Why would I need to go anywhere? And where we were.
And I can take a Lyft or an Uber if I need to get somewhere.
I got an app for that. And for us, we were like, get me free.
Right.
Get me free out of this house. Okay.
Do you want me to go to the store for you?
I'll do it for you.
I'll do it.
What do you need? What do you need to get me out of this house?
And the kids are like, you can get that on Instacart.
Yep.
They'll deliver that to you.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I go to people like you to be like, hey, what's next? Because there's everything is new with the oldest one. And then you don't want to necessarily believe that you need to do the same with the next one behind them as you did with them. So you're just looking for ideas. Parenting is just about looking for ideas. Like what did you do?
You're throwing stuff at the wall.
You're throwing things at the wall and praying that nobody notices all your spaghetti's on the floor.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so interesting to have children with the same basic DNA. You know, you have the same parentage, and you end up with such different people. And so you can't treat them the same. You can't praise them the same, nor can you punish them the same. And you have to think about each one of them, you know, as their own unique individual person, which is, yes, great. But also, where in my brain do I have the time and the space and the wherewithal to be able to shift, to be like, oh, I'm talking to you, which means we need to speak in this way. And this is how you learn. And this is how you understand consequences versus this one over here that feels more like nuck if you buck. Like we gotta get for real with you. And this one over here might cry if you yell too loud, sort of thing. So, and then also figuring out my own self and how I'm feeling at that moment based upon outside pressures. And then they want to test Joe gangster. And then that's where you are. So yeah, and it ebbs and flows, because some days you're like, wow, y'all are fabulous people. Y'all are great. Like me, I could chef's kiss.
And then you're like, and then you internalize that. You're like, oh, I did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, look at me.
That's me.
Of the year.
You see that right there? That's me.
I know.
And they told me, you're the best mom ever. And I'm like, I sure am.
And then
I've got drawings that say that.
Exactly. And I keep them just for the times when they turn around and be like, you are horrible. And I was like, but yesterday you said,
right.
I said that I was amazing. No,
and then sometimes I'm like, you're not the best kid ever. How about that?
Listen.
But you can't
really
say
want to have the conversation.
Right.
When do we get to hold you accountable?
Right.
I'm talking about I need to be better. What about you? But what I love about your kids and what I'm trying to cultivate in my kids is like them being a unit and having a text message chain without me. And
they have that they do have.
Yeah. Like
sometimes I'm like, are y'all talking about me right now on that other chain?
They have to. What else are they talking about? Of course.
I mean, do they have other things interesting to talk about besides how great their mother is? I don't really know what else they can be talking about.
That's what I don't want to know. Like, I want that to happen without me. Yeah. And so, like, I mean, do you think you did something that cultivated them having their own relationship?
I mean, I was very adamant about them being, each other's keeper.
Yeah.
That because I am an only child, their father is an only child. So they have no first cousins. They don't really have any, they don't have biological aunties. They've got the ones that I have given them.
Yeah.
But they have each other. And so I told them that was very important. Now, in the beginning, I don't know that did anything. And I, being an only child, didn't understand sibling behaviors like that back and forth, I love you, I hate you, whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. Because if I like you, I like you. If I don't, then I don't.
Yeah.
But I think what has happened now is that they all live separately. None of them live together. So that has brought them closer. So I think there is something to them all living, far apart and like extremely far apart, that I think has brought them closer together and understanding as they're getting older, because the age gap sort of lessens as they get older, because they are starting to experience some of the same things. Now, mind you, my youngest is still in high school, so there is still a bit of left outness that is there. And so I appreciate the older two acknowledging that and and not talking about certain things in that in their text chain or our text chain when they're doing something together for the grown and trying to be sexy
Yeah,
age
so it's
group,
like,
I
I'm gonna see if she
guess.
says this about her kids.
Right. I don't get there. I don't want to get there. But I know it's there. But then there are certain things I'm hoping that they're talking to each other about that they'll bring to me if they feel like they need to. But if they don't, at least I know that they are having smart conversations with each other and no one is encouraging them to do, too much bad behavior. Skylar is the one encouraging everyone to have tattoos. So every time I turn around, somebody's got a new tattoo. And I just realize I can't do anything about it. And I'm just sort of like, oh, okay, another one. Well, look at that.
Look at you.
You don't like the skin that I created for you at all? Okay, well, that's fine.
I made it with my own body.
I know. It was so smooth. It's smooth. But I think I really appreciate that they love and care for each other and that they are becoming so much closer. Because I will say I was worried for a while that they would not hold on to that bond that I needed them to have. But also I realized that Skylar is probably the glue.
Yeah.
Because my oldest will be the one that I have to remind to call more than Skylar. And then my youngest is a lot like my oldest. And so, I have to remind them, hey, just check in with me. I just like to know that you're alive. And I've also instilled into them that when you're out and about doing things, like I'm not really always just trying to be nosy, but also there's a safety factor to it. And if you don't want me to know that you're going out on a date or something is happening, whatever, then let one of them know. Let somebody know that can get to me if you need to, so that I know what's going on. And then that you're taking license plate pictures of wherever you go and somebody has an address. We have the app that follows everybody. And I will say that Life 360 that we use so that we can keep track of each other is great. But I think they use it more to follow me than I do to follow them, because then I'll get random messages. So what are you doing? Where are you at right now? I was going to call you, but I see that you're at the mall.
I will do a wellness check on my mother in a minute. I'll be like, you did not pick up the phone for 7 hours. And I know that you have nothing else to do but be my mother. So
that's Skylar.
You must be in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. That's Skylar. What's going on? What could you possibly be doing right now? I don't understand what's happening. You didn't answer the phone.
Cliff. Your car is on a cliff in my mind, teetering. Yep. And every time you reach for the phone, you teeter more to fall off the cliff. So that is why you're not answering my phone. And I have to find you. So I understand.
That is and that's how I feel when I'm like, they didn't call me back. It's been like 42 minutes. What's going on? Oh my goodness. Oh gosh, where are they stuck at? And I'm like, okay, calm down and go watch Bridgerton or something.
Oh my gosh, Bridgerton. Listen.
Are you watching?
I have watched every single episode, including Queen Charlotte. I've watched every single ridiculous episode. And you know what's weird is when your teenage daughter is watching it too, and they want to have conversations with you, but you're like, okay. And then we just like tiptoe around the things that we don't want to talk about.
But yeah, we are, young progressive women who have open conversations about sexual health and autonomy and all of that. But I do find myself when my kids have said certain things to me that I turn into my grandmother, and I'm like, oh, what? What?
I'm like, I don't really know how much I want. I'm like, I want you to know about pansexuality. I want you to know that
about vibrators.
Yeah. I want you to know. Oh, girl, see, we haven't gone there. I want you to know that all of these things exist.
I got forced there by one of them. And I was like, wait, well, I'm sorry. What'd you say? What? What'd you ask me? I get real deaf. What?
Yeah.
I got to get on a call. I'm getting ready to get on a call.
It got staticky. I know that doesn't exist anymore, but it's very staticky on my end.
It could get staticky.
Oh my gosh.
It could. Yeah. So I mean, it's all of that. Yeah. So do you talk to your kids about like what's going on in the world when it comes to reproductive health and freedom acts, that sort of thing? Have they asked questions?
Listen, they ask questions. And then they don't ask questions. Like they'll ask a question and then you'll be like, oh, this is an opening to a conversation. They're like, no, you answered the question. That's where we are. But no, there's this show on Netflix called Pleasure. It's what is that called when it's an entertainment and documentary? And
Docutainment.
yes. And it talks about sex ed through a pleasure lens. And being the recovering Pentecostal, Pentecostal I am.
I'm like, what's a Pentecostal? We should talk about your recovery.
It was some kind of Italian.
Let's talk about your recovery. What happened there?
You're like, is it a disease? Is it a condition?
We're gonna have a very special episode. We get really deep.
Pentecostal. What symptoms? Pentecostal.
Sore
evangelical. Mm-hmm. And just, where sex and all of that was really put in an obligation frame, an obligation to your spouse, an obligation to God, and pleasure was never really talked about. And when you talk about sex through an obligation lens, it's ripe for abuse and it's ripe for displeasure. Mm-hmm. And it puts you in not knowing who you are, framework. And so when I saw this show about pleasure, it was like an aha moment on how to talk to the kids about it. So I was like, watch this sex show. I need you to watch this sex show, please. And they're like, Mom. And I was, no. And so they got it. They were not happy or pleased to be forced to watch a sex show by their mother, but it helped me with the framing on all of these things about our rights as people and the current day situation, and the rights that are people, and the conversations that are happening amongst their peers and in society about whether or not women should have, and people in general should have autonomy over their bodies. Be like, well, does it bring you pleasure to be a parent? Then you shouldn't enter into that really difficult role without that understanding. So I just really appreciate it. And I appreciate all of the different tools we have now to have those conversations.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, and I'll look for it. But that was, I think, an aha moment for me in thinking about how to have the conversation around sex, because it had always been just, the mechanics, right? This is how this happens. This is how you get pregnant, that sort of thing. And not around pleasure, because no one had a conversation with me around pleasure. Yeah. And that I'm supposed to enjoy it and want to enjoy it and, demand enjoyment. Yep. Or otherwise it's, not something I necessarily have to do. And so wanting all of my children to understand that is very important, and also understanding that who they decide to be with, that they feel complete comfort with. Then it's not about obviously the pressure of doing it just to be doing it, but also that you feel comfort and you feel safe, that no matter what happens afterwards, that is not a regrettable decision. Exactly. Because I think people have romanticized in a way of like saying it's just normal for your first experiences to be awful and regrettable. Exactly. Or any sexual experience is regrettable. And so when it is, like, that should not be the norm, or even humorous for the most part. Like, it's just like, no, like, this shouldn't have happened. So how do we make sure that there are folks who never actually can say, I can't relate to that. I've never had that experience. Like, I've only been in spaces where I felt comfortable and I didn't regret it. I may not have, decided to be with this person long term or whatever, happens there, but not so much that I just deeply regret ever being near this person.
Yeah, I think people probably assume, I think the knee-jerk reaction to the pleasure frame is that it's impulsive. But I think all the things that you just talked about, really, it's more thoughtful when you think about, okay, I have to know myself to know what pleasure means. Am I old enough? Am I mature enough to know what I like and the implications to know if this will be a pleasurable experience for me? Am I ready to take on those experiences and those consequences? And then, again, put it through the pleasure lens and frame, and then make your decision accordingly, thinking not myopically, but completely about those decisions or those attractions and just decisions in your life. And so I'm working through it on my own too, so it was an epiphany. That's the other thing about being a parent, right? Like your epiphanies, you want to pass on to your child as soon as you can so that they don't have the regrettable, situations that you had. So you're like, I just learned something and I want you to know it too. Please, please. I want you to have this wisdom, please.
I'm trying to spread it on the mountaintop. So,
Yes.
Did you know that you didn't have to do this?
Yes.
Did you know that you could do this?
And they're like, oh, I mean, right now I'm just doing my homework, but I guess I know now. Burst into their room with, do you know? And then they're like, please calm down.
So I'm going to ask you a question about balance. Is there such thing as balance of being the mother of six growing children that you are bringing up in this world to be whatever it is they decide they want to be, as well as the executive director, founding director of Mothering Justice, and on the various boards, and an actually elected official?
Yeah, I think you have to have balance is being okay with things falling off. If people think, balance is I got this complete and this complete, I got even number of things complete. No, it's about just being able to accept that this world demands too much of us. I was watching something yesterday and it was like, what summer was for us? It was, or like they're like saying, your parents didn't know where you were. Your parents didn't know where you were. They went about their life. Your parents' summer looked just like fall for them. They went to work, they came home, and you just had to do your own thing, right? And the expectations for parenting were lower. And it was like, make sure they're still alive when you come home. And that was it. I'm oversimplifying, but it was different, right? And so
it was that, do you know where your children are?
Do you know where your children are? We're like, yeah, of course they've got to look around. That was the understanding of the time. Be like, I'm not sure. I have not seen Jimmy since 9:30 this morning.
They could just walk outside. I remember distinctly my grandfather walking outside of the house and yelling my name.
Yeah.
And I better have heard it, which means if I didn't hear it, one, I'm too far, or I'm in somebody's house and I'm not supposed to be.
And you weren't supposed to go in somebody's house.
I wasn't supposed to go in nobody's house. That was not okay.
You're not supposed to be in somebody's house.
Yeah, why are you in their house? Or you had to go to the bathroom. Come home.
Come home. Go to the bathroom. We got toilets here. I remember. Oh my gosh. But yeah,
I don't really know what that was about, except I guess it's a safety thing.
It's a safety thing.
It sounds also odd that you could just be outside randomly, but don't go in nobody's house.
And I feel that was a Black thing because, like, my neighbor was white and I'd be like 1 foot in. Oh, I remember. Do you ever do 1 foot in the house?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Right there in like the vestibule area of the house. You'd be right there and you'd be like, were you in the house?
No. I mean,
or I have to go all the way back home and ask, can I come inside? Of, Carmen and Ria's house down the street. That's who's, and then finally I was able to go in the house and it's like, oh, and they have a VCR. They had a VCR. We didn't have a VCR.
Had snacks.
They had animals. They had a dog and a cat. And my grandparents didn't believe in having no animals in the house. And so, it was like a wonderland. They got a cat.
I still to this day, the smell of ravioli, because the only time, and I'm sure this woman got it out of a can, but I had never had ravioli before because, again,
with Chef Boyardee,
we only had Jamaican food, which was amazing, but this was a novelty. And the smell of ravioli when I was allowed to go in Justin's house and have dinner, and I was like, this is an amazing pillow of meat. I love it.
Pillow of meat.
What? Who came up with this? It's amazing. And then you put sauce on it. What is sauce? We had gravy. What is sauce?
I had never had neither ramen noodles or boxed macaroni and cheese until I was probably in the 10th grade or 11th grade in high school. I had never had these things because my grandmother, when she cooked like old Black people food. Yeah. And so I ate greens all the time. Like greens were not a holiday.
And that's how you got pretty skin, girl. That's why your
I
skin's
mean, it's all them turnip greens, but it was pot roast. It was, smothered pork chops. It was smothered chicken. It was, baked macaroni and cheese. There was cornbread in my house every day.
Oh
Every
God.
single day, there was homemade cornbread made from a cast iron skillet.
Oh my God.
Every day. And so going to McDonald's was a treat. My grandma would take me sometimes and she'd be like, well, we can stop at the McDonald's and because she'd be like, I might have me a little fish sandwich.
Okay.
And so that was like, we was doing something. But my grandfather going over there, what are you going over there to get this no count food? You got food at home.
We got food right here.
What, eat them hamburgers? Why you want to eat a hamburger for? When you better put some gravy on that and put it over some rice. Like
rice. You need rice. They were like, what is this? But yeah, it was like such a novelty to experience some other food. But anyway, I don't know, we got on a tangent, but like the balance thing, there was lower expectations. And so now with the just ridiculous expectations around parenting, around always being accessible for work, having a social life, and the pressures that social media puts on what fun should look like in our life, there's no way of having a balance. So it's being able to, in your mind and in your soul, be okay with things falling off and your life looking like what it looks like at this particular moment. And so, no, I don't believe necessarily in balance. And I'm just trying to figure out for myself what okay looks like and what enough is.
Well, that's a question. What is enough?
I don't know, girl. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you about being a leader. Because you are a leader. Like, what does that mean to you that you lead an organization? You're, a community leader. Is it what you thought it would be? And, do you recommend?
Do I recommend?
And do you recommend it?
0 stars. Do not recommend. Being a leader it's like being an adult, right? When we tell our kids, like, you know what, this is hard. Being an adult is hard, but it comes with the freedoms that you wouldn't give up. Like, yeah, they got these bills, but nobody tells me what my bedtime is. So, I think like being a leader it's hard, and you have people that admire you and put you on a pedestal. And then when you do something wrong, that is a hard, fast, long fall in their mind. But you still have to come being vulnerable and being truthful about where you are in your life, knowing that people will relate. And because they'll relate, they want to follow you. I thought leaders were better than everybody else. They had it figured out. But I think leaders have a wisdom in a particular area, and they're human in every other area, and they're human in that area too. There was a phrase I heard on another podcast, rare air. And I think about leaders like that. They're not afraid to step into the rare air. And everybody's rare air is different, right? So some people, it is seeing this world in a different way. And that's their rare air. And they share that with the rest of the world who can't see that vision. Or it is, being able to be sexually liberated. That's that leader's rare air. And they're able to give us a glimpse of what the other side of the mountain is. They're able to see something without oppression and follow it and lean into it. And then we're able to see it too through their eyes and through their wisdom. And so I think that's what being a leader is now. That's, I think, how I define it. And I just try to be completely honest about what it looks like for me at this particular moment. And I don't have everything figured out. I'm tired. I'm wrong. But you have to do it anyway. Because who else will? Who else is going to speak the truth to power? Who else is going to hold space for the people who are usually put aside? Who else is going to call out the injustices of this world and paint a vision for something different? And so it ain't cute. It just is,
Do you feel like you are given the deference needed in your role as being a leader? Do you feel humanized? Because I think sometimes, especially in parenting, even when we make that comparison, is that children don't see their parents as human or as, people the way that they're people, making mistakes and learning, at the same time and coming up with new ideas. And then there's this expectation that you're just supposed to know, whatever is coming next. And you're supposed to know how to react to whatever is coming next. And so I think that's why it can sometimes be shocking to children when parents falter or cry or get upset in a way that jars them, because why would you do that? Like, you need to be that anchor. And I think it's the same in leading and being in charge and being the executive director or what have you, is that when you don't know, or when the expectation is different, and when you fail in some way, or fail is like a big word, because it may not even be failure. It's just like, well, I don't know, and I don't know how to do this because something is coming at me. And they're like, well, why? Why don't you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it was us who did it wrong, or society, or the progressive movement. But as far as when we're talking about in the workspace, we made such a big deal about Black women and all that they know, and that they need to be in charge, that I think people are reacting to that. And they say like, okay, but I thought you said you knew. And I was like, yeah, I know more than them. That doesn't mean I know everything. I know my experience more than they know my experience. And they've been speaking on my behalf for so many years. That's what I was talking about. But when when we're asked these huge questions, and because of our internalized imposter syndrome or whatever, we're like, I can't say I don't know on the big stage, on the main stage. And the expectations for us, and I mean, don't get me wrong, we bring a lot to the table, but to consider us superhuman and have all the answers, and when we don't, that, oh yeah, see, we shouldn't have trusted you, no way anyway. That's not fair. And then as far as in the parenting space, I'm grateful for the 6 children I have, because they balance it out. When somebody thinks I'm supposed to know everything, quickly somebody else would be like, well, how is mom supposed to know what you feel about blah, 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 when blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, thank Jesus. And they usually do that. They usually are like, just leave mom alone. She messed up, but that's okay.
She's tired.
She's tired. Look at her. Look how old she looks. I'm like, thank you.
That is the one thing about having multiple children. As much as I'm a fan of being an only child, having multiple children, I think, saves you in a lot of ways, because somebody is they're not all usually against you at the same time, unless you are really doing something wrong. If they all revolt at the same time, you might just want to go on a work trip. Yeah, go on a work trip. and then sit and think about what you did wrong, put yourself in a timeout.
Exactly. Ooh, yes, that's what I need. I need an adult timeout. That's what I need to think about.
I think we should have multiple quarterly adult timeouts. Yes. Be like, you know what? I think I'm having some trouble and I need to go gather myself. I need an adult timeout.
Yeah, let me just calm things down for me so I can think about what I did and whether or not I wanted to do it.
Right. Why did I make those choices?
And I can best do those on a beach with a drink. That's when the timeouts are the most effective.
They are and I enjoy having beach timeouts with you. I think it's about time we had another one.
Yes.
I want to ask you, because you mentioned a little bit about the progressive movement. And I'll be honest, I struggle with what that is. Yeah. And I'm not even sure how to define it. So, asking you and your wisdom, what is the progressive movement? But also, is there room for Black people in the progressive movement? Is the progressive movement should it be centered on Black people, or should they even care about being a part of the progressive movement?
Yeah. Okay, so progressive movement, to me, if I were to really define it, it's a set of ideas about the sustainability of our world and country. Now, does that get messy? Yes. But to me, at its core, it's about how do we sustain this planet? How do we sustain community? How do we sustain love and our ability to show love in all of its forms? Again, now when you add people into that, things get really messy. And with that definition, I think you have to think about indigeneity in how we used to live as people in our various places when we were living in true relationship with ourselves, each other, and the earth. And you can't not center Black people in that. You can't not center our origin story as a people. And then you also can't not center the people who've been marginalized with the complete lack and the lack of regard for well-being. The people who have been most marginalized have to be at the center because they're the ones who know what happened. They're like, let me tell you exactly what happened to me. And how are you going to undo it unless you do that? So we all suffer the injustices of living out of relationship with ourselves, our community, and our bodies, and our world. But the people who have suffered it the most need to be at the center of the conversation about how to restore it.
What I think about is the environmental justice movement.
Yeah.
And it's one of the issues that Make It Work Nevada works on is environmental justice. And we look at it in thinking about food deserts, utility bills, and other things. And environmental justice, I think, stems from, like climate work and all of that, and where climate work has never centered Black folks specifically. And it has been a struggle, I think, to even get into some of these spaces and into some of these rooms and sit at some of these tables and have some of these conversations. And I've had funders question the work we're trying to do around environmental justice. And they're like, well, that's not really this or that. And I'm like, well, the people that we're talking to, this is what's important to them. And it does lead back to having conversations around climate and green spaces, closed parks, not having any sort of park areas. And if you're in Las Vegas, there's a lot less green, right? And then there was a movement by folks to pull up grass, artificial or real, because then you're using too much water when it's a desert. But when you pull up all of this green, then it makes it hotter. So then you have these heat islands. And so that goes on and on and on. And where are the most of these heat islands?
Exactly. I was like, who bears the brunt?
Who ends up with the brownouts? But then they're not centered.
Yeah.
Nor are they centered in a way of even asking their stories. And so this is some of the work that, we want to dig deeper into. But I feel like, those moments of all my life, I got to fight just to get space in a room, yet you're calling yourself progressives because, you're thinking about the world in a way that is inclusive to everybody, but it's inclusive to everybody as long as everybody is not trying to talk.
Yeah.
As long as you're saying, yes, we believe Black Lives Matter. We believe love is love. We believe, in science, all the things, everything that on that little sign that people put in their yard now. But it's different and it's uncomfortable when you need to step back and then let the people who are actually most affected tell their stories, not you tell them for them and make them trauma porn. And so the trauma porn comes into play of that's how you end up, how it can end up being centered is through the trauma and not any other way. And so this is why, I say that I have such a struggle with ever calling myself a progressive or even saying that our work is, in the progressive movement, because I don't know that I actually feel like that's where I belong. And also, I think just being a Black person makes me progressive. Like, I am a Black woman. I am progressive, like movement or not.
You have to be, because you're never centered in this conversation, this reality, this vision by whomever. To be progressive is to be able to see something that isn't. And, we always joke about, like, futuristic movies and not having Black people in it. Like, are we in the future? Did I make it? Did my people make it? And so we have to imagine something that has never been, and that's equality and freedom. And so, of course, that's progressive. But yeah, no, it's, we have to have the real conversation about capitalism and how that muddies the waters for everybody, because there's a perception of giving up something in order to have something else. And unless we're having that conversation about who has to give up what, I used to work in the population space, and the movement, is around zero.
What does that mean? The population. Yeah. I'm gonna say people are gonna want to know. She used to work with the population.
So the thinking is that the world is overpopulated, and that we need to have fewer babies. I think they've moved.
You pushed back on that. You pushed back on that hard.
I pushed all the way back on it. And, the movement has been criticized for being really white. And, when you talk about population and not talk about consumption, then you're saying, oh, people in Africa need to have fewer babies, when America is using the most
per person.
Per person. And so it's not about population, it's about consumerism. And consumerism and how it's been tied to our ability to justify and quantify our worth in this world. And so unless we detangle that and say, that you don't have to own all of this stuff to be worthy. And then that conversation's about people who have consuming less, not people who don't being different people. And so it's just a different conversation that.
Oh, yeah. That makes me think about, like shaming poor people for having things.
Exactly.
And shopping and buying, cheaper clothing,
exactly.
Shein or what have you. And so even though you could buy a box full of Shein as a person who is on a limited income versus someone who has a lot of money and you bought a plane.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's our choices then get shamed instead of the system that we live in, right? That makes it like, to survive, to have happiness, we have said you have to have stuff. And then we're like, well, you can't have that stuff. Well, that stuff is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't shop at Walmart. Okay, not everybody can afford Free People. Because first of all, Free People ain't free. I hope you're not sponsored. Or anything but. Because it's sustainable and it's blah, blah, blah. Well, everything needs to be sustainable.
Right. It's like affordable housing. I really hate the term affordable housing. It's like we need affordable housing. All housing should be,
needs to be affordable.
Like, I don't understand. It's like, we're building affordable housing. Just this piece right here. The rest of it, not so much. Not affordable. But hopefully you'll buy it. But this right here, we're going to make a little bit that is actually affordable. Like, just when that comes out of people's mouths, I'm like, do you hear what you just said? Or did you not understand that you just said that this piece right here is affordable for these people?
Exactly.
It's very odd. So one of the last questions I want to ask you is about the term BIPOC and how you feel about it.
I don't even know what it means, Erika. See, you brought it up, and now I've got to admit that I'm very confused by the term. And then I'm going to get, depending on how popular your podcast is, I'm going to get 10 to 15 emails.
Well, hopefully you get 10 to 15,000 emails, but it hasn't quite gotten that popular. But I'll preface by saying the reason why I asked, when I was with you a few weeks ago in DC on one of these DC trips, and we were talking, and I think you brought up people of color.
Yeah.
And you said people of color was coined by a Black lady.
Yeah.
I did not know this, so I'd like for you to explain this so I could learn more about that. Now, where BIPOC comes from, I don't know where it comes from, but it all of a sudden came upon me by someone saying one day on a call, "Do you prefer being called BIPOC?" And I was like, "Well, I don't. How do I?" And I was like, "What is she asking me? How do I identify?" Right, I identify how, like, a person of color who likes ladies. Like, I didn't know what she meant. I didn't. I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, I know now that, folks are wanting to be called BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color." And I was like, "I'm not all those things, though."
It's supposed to be. And then listen, okay, parts of speech: Black, Indigenous, people of color. So is it Black and Indigenous and people of color, or is it Black, Indigenous, people of color? Like, are Black and Indigenous adjectives for people of color?
Yeah.
And then what does the people of color in this context refer to?
Everybody else who's not Black or Indigenous, but you got some color on you.
But what?
I guess.
But what is that?
And then a lot of people identify as having some color and being a person of color.
Yeah.
And so then is there a definition of that? And to me, it's just, for me, in my opinion, it's a hodgepodge of a way to lump a bunch of people together and say, look how we're including all the people. Now that's everybody who is not white, basically. And so I'm like, but it's weird and it's inaccurate. And I think people outside of this work and this movement in the progressive space or any of this don't use it, because I've had friends watch me on Zoom conferences or what have you. And especially during the pandemic, when all of that stuff was like on Facebook more. And I've had friends say, "What is that? Why did you say that? Why did somebody say BIPOC? What does BIPOC mean? Why did you give your pronouns, when you spoke, that sort of thing?" Like, these aren't things that people necessarily do all day long, every day, and how they introduce themselves.
Yeah. And I think there's value in bringing something to community that has not been used before for the purposes of something. And that's why, POC, I don't give it up. I know that it has been used incorrectly, right? So, okay, origin story. People of color was coined by Black women to talk about the potential political power of people of color. But the problem with what I believe the problem with the term is it's based in shared oppression and not shared joy and contribution to this country. And so it's hard to live into that. So people want to identify with their communities of color where they have a history, a tradition, and joy. So I am a Black woman because I have joy in that. POC, it's like, okay, we both have been oppressed. Woohoo! That's a club that I want to be in. No. But I think it's important in the context. Now, POC has been used to water down Blackness in some terms, right? Like, they'd be like, oh, POC, because we don't want to say Black. That was really big in, I want to say, the early 2000s. And so Black people spoke out against that because they're like, no, I'm going to name Black and you're not going to be afraid of Black. And so I understand that part of the argument as well. Now, again, like I said, I'm confused with BIPOC. So say what you mean. Say who you including and why. The term is confusing to me. I'm sure it was made with all good intent. And so I'm never going to be like, whatever. I don't know. I don't know, girl. I don't necessarily use it because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't say if it was made with good intent or not good intent, but I don't use it. I find myself having to remind folks in our org, like, that's not how we don't discuss things in that way. Yeah. And I don't want to water down the work that we're trying to do and who we're trying to center in order to appease others. Because in the end, the work that we do benefits everybody, no matter how much we center Black women. And actually, because we center Black women, more folks get to sit at the table and have a large piece of that pie, as we moving on up to our deluxe apartment in the sky. We are doing it together. Paid sick days isn't Black lady paid sick days.
Okay.
And so when we do Medicaid expansion to cover doula services, it isn't just for Black ladies having babies. It's for anybody who needs that service. And so we're just centering the stories. And so I think that has to be okay. And I don't know if I've said this on the podcast or not before, but there was one time in particular that there was a particular organization that we get a small amount of funding from that was asking about work we were doing and me saying, Black lady this, Black lady that.
Yeah.
And they said, well, are you including others? Are you including Latinos? Are you including API? Are you including this and the third? And I said, well, everybody's welcome. This is not a space where people are unwelcome, but the stories that we center is that way. And she's like, well, have you considered including X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
And I said, well, when you talk to these other organizations that center those folks, do you ask them if they are including Black women?
Yeah.
And she said, oh, I see your point. And I said, no, but I'm asking the question. I would like you to answer the question. And she said, well, no, we haven't had that conversation yet. And I'm like, but you never have that conversation. And I know because I have asked the EDs of some of these other organizations that I'm cool with, and we do partner and work together. It's not a segregated space. It shouldn't be a segregated space. But I asked, do they ask you if you include Black women in your work when you talk about doing X, Y, and Z for the Latino community? Do they say, so what are you doing for Black women or Afro Latinos?
Yeah.
No, but it is constantly asked of us.
I think because of anti-Blackness, Black is the most inclusive term there is, right? Like when we're talking about policy and we say, if it's for Black people, guess what? It's for everybody, because those are the people that will always be left out of the policy. So it's really, I wrote something on this. I need to find it, but it's like Black is inclusive. I mean, Black includes all the colors. If we want to get, really philosophical about the color of Black and what it means everything. And so to center the people, again, the most marginalized Black women, everybody will benefit from that policy.
So I have to ask you, because I ask everybody, what does democracy mean to you?
Oh.
And do you think we have democracy right now? As we're talking about, and we're talking specifically about, the political climate, being in America and this upcoming 2024 election.
Yeah.
What is democracy and do we have it?
I mean, to me, democracy is a goal and an idea. Do we practice it, as in try to have it and not succeed? Yes. So democracy is this idea that when you include everybody, the majority will speak for everybody because, that is, everybody has been included. And then what will rise is a popular opinion through a process. We have not included anyone in any of the processes to then have democracy, right? Voting still is not an equal opportunity exercise. So you have democracy around the people who are able to participate. And then those people further, isolate their power in terms of like congressional districts or procedural things, where then they practice this tactic of inclusion, but not everybody is included, so that the results are not reflective of the goal of democracy. And so that's what I think our goal is, and what we've always tried to do is try to democratize the processes so that the practice and the tactic of voting and majority rules will be reflective of the need. And no, we're not there. And sometimes you want to throw in the towel and you'll be like, there's no way of democratizing this system. We should enter into a different type of way to get people's needs met. But then you get drawn back and be like, but this is my job. This is my vocation, is changing this system. Other people, they have different callings in life. They have different worldviews. And I think they're all important. But for me and my life, this job of making a more democratic society, and it'll be work that I do until the day I die. And will it be realized then? I'm not sure. But this is my job.
How are you feeling about our current democracy? How are you feeling about the 2024 election? Are you worried? Are you hopeful? Are you afraid?
I have no feelings. I just have preparation. The hopeful fear, it doesn't serve me and it causes me wrinkles. And as you know, I'm very vain. So there's no point in any of that.
I will not be frowning upon this election.
Yeah, no, that doesn't serve me. Looking cute. So I'm just preparing. I'm going to work as hard as I can to again create the conditions in which we can have a more democratic society. And to that end, it is getting Biden reelected. Like I told you, we have a choice between, if we are the braiders and we have a choice between someone who has alopecia and a tennis ball. Trump is the beautiful lady who has alopecia. We cannot braid her hair. We cannot hold Trump accountable. We just braid it into air. Biden is the tennis ball. We're going to pinch and we're going to get that little bit of fur and we're going to braid into it. And that's our ability to hold.
And we're about to make some micros.
We're going to make some micros. We're going to braid a little bit of hair and then we're going to braid onto that little bit of hair so we can have a full braid. And that is, that's our job as organizers, is just finding a way to do something against the way where there's no way to do anything. We're not looking for Jesus. We're not looking for the best candidate. We're just looking for an avenue in which we can make change, a little bit or a lot. And so, so that is, we're facing fascism. That's what we're up against. And I will work my hardest. And then if fascism wins, I will make plans accordingly there. But, worrying about it, having hope for it, it doesn't serve me right now. There are things in which those things serve me, but not in this instance. So I'm just making plans around what I need to do to make sure my family and myself have a future.
I am picturing this tennis ball that we are actively all trying to braid, because, now you need multiple braiders on this tennis ball in order to make something happen. And I've had conversations with multiple people about this and with an array of ideas and thoughts around it. No one is compared it to braiding a tennis ball. So, you win.
Thank you.
But we have younger folks, and I've talked to my kids and other people their age in their early 20s and late teens, who are so just appalled that this is the system that they have been brought into, and the promise of becoming an adult and having the space to help make choices and guide our communities and our country, and say, this is the options that we have. Yeah. And they are very tied to a lot of the issues that are happening around the world. And because we're in a different space where it is right there in our face and we can see firsthand, where they can't hide the tragedies that are happening in multiple places. And I will say that, honestly, I feel some kind of way that there's not more media attention and uproar about what's happening on the continent and what's happening in the Congo there and what's happening to Black people right now. But then they're like, okay, how do I vote for either one of them? I don't want to vote for either one of them
Yeah.
because they're both awful. And this one's not doing this. This one's going to do even worse things over here. And it's
Yeah.
that lesser of two evils that they want to remove that sort of language. And so I'm struggling to figure out how to have these conversations. How do we get them to understand that? Because I do also understand that we keep saying that over and over again, that next time we're going to do better. We just got to get through this point right here so we can get to something better.
Yeah.
And you got folks who I've made the analogy around standing in a line. I've stood in a long line at the post office. And I'm standing there and I'm waiting and waiting. And then people come in behind you and they've been there for 10 minutes and they're, oh my God, what is this line? What's going on? What's blah, blah, got somewhere to go, blah, 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 blah. You just got here. And I've been standing in this line all this time, people ahead of you that are not hollering and moaning the way you are, and you just walked in the door.
Yeah.
But they also see what's happening ahead and they're like,
no. It's true. It's true. It's true. And that's why I'll never rail against somebody else choosing a different way of making change. But your way of making change, are we making it only more difficult by electing a fascist? I get it. I get you don't want to participate in a system that you think is not leading to liberation for our people. I get it. But this is the system that we have. So in order to not make it more difficult for me and my tactics or you and your tactics, we have to first eliminate the threat of fascism. And then, so however you see that, whether or not you are leaning into the beloved community and making sure everyone's needs are met outside of the government system, or you are fully participating in getting better people elected to lower office so that when, there's an opening in a higher office, they have more name recognition, and that's how you're making change. Either way, we still have this system and this existential threat right in front of us. And so we have to deal with that before we can do those things. It's like, again, being a parent. I need to feed you regardless. Yes, we need to talk about your grades. Yes, we need to talk about how you want to live in the world. But I need to put food in your body first. This is the problem in front of us, where we cannot address any other problem until we address this one. And so, that's what I try to convince people. We need to vote for our own power. And we have no power if the system will be taken down completely by a fascist regime. We have to have a seat at the table. And so this is what we need to do at this very moment for our future power. And that's how I see it.
So you and I were recently at the White House, and I've been a couple times in the last month and a half. And obviously because it's election season and let's parade some people through. And in one of our previous episodes, I talked about a little bit about being at the White House, and the top lines of one, it's an honor to get an invite to the White House, and knowing that my background and my knowing where my grandparents came from, that this wasn't even something thought about, right? No more than it was thought about we would have a Black president at any point or a woman vice president. And here we are. But I did have hesitation in far as my feelings around how decisions have been made on current events, and also just knowing that there still hasn't been enough that has helped Black women, Black folks in the United States. And here we are, and it's election time. Let's come and, get all gussied up and stomp with Kirk Franklin and dance around.
Yeah.
Did that cross your mind at all? Did you have any thoughts around or hesitation around accepting the invite to the White House?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think being a Black woman is to constantly be in the intersection of opportunity and understanding inequality, right? So we have these opportunities where we can open the door a little bit more for the people behind us, and we can express a view in a room where we might be the only ones who look like us, and we feel an obligation there. Like, this is an opportunity to do good. This is an opportunity to show somebody that if I'm here, you can be here. But at the same time, knowing, like, am I contributing to a system and administration that is oppressive? And that is a constant in our balancing whether or not we should go. You know, we've been on text message chains with people constantly being like, okay, I got this invite to meet so-and-so, but this is happening. What does it mean if my face is in that room? And it's like, sometimes it's, what does it look like if my face is in that room, but my voice is at the table?
Yeah.
And so, this child is beating down my door because it's her birthday, and she wants to open the presents. You might not hear it, but she's beating the door down.
Well, we will be wrapping up because I will not be standing in the way of a birthday celebration for your baby. And I'm very excited and to know that this baby is 6. Like, it is a wonder when you see folks come from the womb to now fully formed people who have whole conversations and have opinions and thoughts and the ability to beat down your door.
Yes. So, she said, time is up.
Right. She was like, that's enough podcasting.
Yes.
There's other things to be done. But I want to thank you.
Yeah, Erika, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
To be on Sticky Note Conversations. And of course, I think we'll have a follow-up conversation maybe after the election or when anything else interesting just happens and we have something to talk about. We can do that. But in the meantime, please enjoy your Saturday. And I want to thank everybody for listening to Sticky Note Conversations. And remember, if you have any thoughts or questions, comments about today's conversation or future conversations, and you have any ideas on people who should be on Sticky Note Conversations, don't forget to email me at stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. Again, stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. And until next time, thank you for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did.
Yeah, bye everyone.
Yay.
Yay! All right, girl.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington, with music, mixing, and editing by Black Gypsy LLC. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.